Hello. Hey, so welcome to the Georgia Promise Scholarship Info and Q&A session. It is hosted by Georgia Black Home Educators, who are the producers of the Flourish Homeschool Conference. We wanted to take this time to really go over an amazing opportunities here in Georgia, which is the Georgia Promise Scholarship, which is Senate Bill 233. And so today we have with us Kyle Wingfield, the CEO of Georgia Public Policy Foundation. And so Kyle is a native of Dalton, Georgia, the carpet capital of Georgia. He's a graduate of UGA. He's also been a columnist for the AJC with a focus on state policy, school choice, education, transportation, healthcare, state and local taxation. He also has several journalism awards, and most importantly, so I'm a homeschool mama. He is an Eagle Scout, and all the homeschool moms go, "Aw." So thank you, Kyle, for coming and joining us to really go through this with some of our parents. And can you tell us more about the Georgia Public Policy Foundation? Oh, I'm so sorry. I wanted to make sure I didn't introduce myself. My name is Nicole P. Doyle, and I am one of the co-founders of the Georgia Black Home Educators Network. Like I said, we're the producers of the Flourish Conference. And I also have here with us Michelle Shaw.
I'm Michelle Shaw. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay, yes. Good. I'm the director of Eastside Academic Studies and Northeast Independent Preparatory Academy, and one of the co-founders of the Georgia Black Home Educators Network. And we're glad to have Kyle here with us.
Yeah. And so Michelle is doing double duty, chaperoning kids at homeschoolers at a movie night. So we appreciate her there. My babies are there too. But Kyle, please tell us more about what the Georgia Public Policy Foundation does.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nicole and Michelle, for having me here with y'all tonight, and to everybody in the audience. Just excited to get to share a little bit about this really great opportunity that's been a long time coming, and is nearing the point where it'll be available to families. And we just want to make sure that as many people get a chance to learn about it and figure out if it's a right fit, right opportunity for them as they pursue their children's education, the best fit that they can have. So the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute or think tank based here in Atlanta. We've been around since 1991, and we really just work to be a trusted, independent resource for voters and elected officials alike. And we propose actionable solutions to real life problems. And obviously, the education of your children is one of the things that matters most to you if you're a parent or a grandparent or a loved one of a child. And we know from not just our own experience, but from lots and lots of data that children have different needs, right? They need to have different approaches to education, different settings, different speeds, all sorts of things. And homeschooling families know this as well as anyone. And so one of the issues that we've worked on for a long time, in addition to things like transportation and healthcare, taxes, regulation, criminal justice reform, housing affordability, you name it. If it's an economic related issue facing the state of Georgia, at some point our foundation has probably worked on it over the past 33 years. But one constant throughout that time has been K-12 education, and specifically making sure families have choices for their children. So, in Georgia, we have public charter schools. We have the SB 10 special needs scholarship that's available to get kids into private schools if they have special needs, and that's a better setting for them. We have the tax credit scholarship through student scholarship organizations. But this Promise Scholarship, which was approved finally earlier this year, back in the spring when the General Assembly was meeting, and then signed by Governor Kemp, is really a direct way for the state to assist families with their children's education outside of the public schools. So what is the Promise Scholarship? It's been called a voucher by a lot of people, especially in the media, especially the critics or opponents of the bill. I have nothing against vouchers, but this is way more than a voucher. And that's really important for homeschooling families. A voucher is a coupon. You can take it and use it primarily in the educational setting for private school tuition. The Promise Scholarship is designed to be more of an education savings account. And we've seen those being passed with increasing frequency in lots of states around the country. And this is the first program of this type that Georgia is creating. Now, what's the difference? Like I said, a voucher, you can use it, apply it toward private school tuition, and that's pretty much it. There are lots of different uses for this program, and I'm just going to pull up a few of them on my screen over here. So if I'm looking away from you, that's why. You can use this for tuition. You can use this for tutoring. You can use it to pay for curriculum, textbooks. If your child requires additional support, you can use the funds for occupational therapy, speech language therapy, physical therapy. There we go. That's the graphic that I'm reading off of right now. Other services provided by certified physicians or licensed therapists. You can use up to $500 of the scholarship for transportation expenses with approved service providers. And we're going to get to that approved service providers bit in a little bit. And you don't have to use it or lose it completely. Up to 50% of the award can be carried over to the next year. And so this is a really important aspect, all together, but that kind of highlights one aspect of these. With a traditional voucher, you're going to use it. And so it's use it or lose it. And there's kind of an incentive for the private schools that take that to increase their tuition over the time because they know they're guaranteed a certain amount via the voucher. One really important aspect of the Promise Scholarship, like other ESAs, is that you have so many different uses of it that it should keep the service providers from thinking, oh, we're guaranteed a certain amount, we can raise our prices. This is a competitive marketplace that service providers are going to be operating in. And so it really ought to keep help keep pressure downward on prices and make sure that you're not just seeing inflation within the things that you're already buying if you participate in this. So what does it do for you? It's a $6,500 maximum award at this point. We could see that increase over time, but for now, that's the award. And then there may be some administrative fees that are taken out of that, but it's a very limited percentage. It's available starting for fall of next year, so the 2025-26 school year. And this is a bill created by the General Assembly earlier this year. We have really expect this to be a long-term program, not something that's going to be here one year and not the next. So this is something that we want you to be able to count on and feel good about. To be eligible, now this is very important. And this will rule out some homeschooling families, but others it'll provide an opportunity to, and hopefully it'll provide an opportunity and encouragement to families that might have wanted to homeschool but weren't able to for various financial restraints or other reasons. To be eligible, the child has to be enrolled in a public school or entering kindergarten, eligible for kindergarten next fall. So the public school attendance requirement is waived for students entering kindergarten. So that is important. But otherwise, you have to be enrolled in a public school. The idea is that, from the state's perspective, they're spending money over here. Family makes a different choice. They're spending money over there. The next important aspect of this is that you have to live in the attendance zone of a lower performing school as defined by the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. Now, the way the law defines that is that it's a school in the bottom 25% statewide, according to academics. That list, you can see the link on the screen now. That list was just released last week. I'm told there were a couple of mistakes on it, so they're going to be making some tweaks there. So you might want to check, if you click it today, you might want to check back in a week or so to make sure that nothing has changed for your situation. But you have to live in that attendance zone. Now, you'll note I said you have to be enrolled in a public school and you have to live in that attendance zone. You don't have to attend the school that's on the list. And that's very important. So if you're an elementary school student, or you have an elementary school student and the middle school is on the list, you don't have to wait for your child to be enrolled or old enough for that middle school. You can go ahead and apply today. That's really important because, one, we don't want children to have to wait until they're actually enrolled in a bottom 25% school. We know oftentimes if you got a bottom 25% school down the line for you, chances are you're not in a really high performing school at the moment. And it also allows for families to make a choice if they want and keep their children together. So if they have a child in that middle school and a child in the elementary school, they don't have to make different decisions for those children if they don't want to. Of course, if they want to, that's their choice. And we all know that if you have more than one child, they're not the same. But if you want to make the same choice for all your children, this allows you to do that. And so we think that's very important. The parent has to have lived in Georgia for 1 year. There's an exception for active duty military families. And you cannot stack this scholarship with the two private choice programs I mentioned earlier, the special needs scholarship or a tax credit scholarship from a student scholarship organization. So it does have to be one or the other. You can't combine those, to add up the money. But if you're eligible and you apply and you can get enrolled in the program, then there are a wide array of ways that you can use this money. And many of them apply to homeschool students. Service providers have to get approved as well. There's been a process in place for private schools already. I see a question on the screen right now. How can you become a provider? There's going to be a process for non-private schools to also get pre-approved to be a service provider. Because when families get access to this, there's going to be kind of an online wallet, so to speak, that you would go in and direct the money to. It's not like you get a check in the mail and then you spend it. It gets funded by the state to this online wallet, and then you direct it to approved service providers. There will be a way to get reimbursed or to get other expenses approved and to get those reimbursed. There will be a parent review committee of parents of enrolled students who review those expenses and make those decisions. And the idea is that parents who are making these choices in their own lives and know how this works are the ones that ought to judge whether an expense makes sense or not and ought to be approved and reimbursed. But I don't believe the process for getting approved other than for private schools is out there yet. I would simply go to mygeorgiapromise.org. There's a contact link. The Georgia Education Savings Authority, which is a new entity that was created to administer this program. Somebody there can get you more information. So that would be the way that you become that provider. Those are most of the things that I wanted to go over from the top. Eligibility. Yes, there's that private school handbook on there that if you're operating something like a school, there's requirements for that. But we really believe that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for hybrid homeschools, for micro schools, for learning pods of homeschoolers, for co-ops, to band together and use some of these dollars and to further their children's education. And so, it's not just the private school route, but that is up there as well. There are some stipulations. There is a testing requirement that comes along with this. So that'll be the kind of thing that people want to decide is that something that they agree with enough to accept the money and then accept a restriction like that. The testing, the result has to get reported to the parents. So you would be seeing that. I will also say that and I'm looking this up, on the private school handbook, there's a list of approved tests. So it's not the state tests, the milestones. These are all nationally norm reference tests. I believe there's a list of 13 of those that have been approved so far. If there's another test that you know of that you believe would be more appropriate and ought to be considered, I think you can still email the authority with, hey, you ought to take a look at this, and they're still reviewing those. This is just the initial set of tests that have been approved. There's a question here: are there any programs that do not require enrolling your children in Georgia Public Schools for a year in order to qualify? At the state level, all the private choice programs do require that. However, there's an exception with the student scholarship organizations, the tax credit scholarship. You can get a waiver from that requirement. And there are certain conditions that you would have to meet for that to get out of the public school attendance requirement. That requirement is also a little shorter than the one for the Promise Scholarship. So that is a little different. And the other thing is that for that one, if your child's eligible for kindergarten or first grade, you don't have to have the public school attendance requirement. So different programs, different requirements. It gets a little complicated, but there's information out there about each of those to help you decide which one might be the best fit for you. Don't know if we have any other questions coming up. Is the public school requirement for the year preceding the scholarship? Yeah, so it is. So public schools in Georgia do an enrollment count twice a year, in October and then in March, if you think about the school year. So you have to have been enrolled for an October enrollment count and a March enrollment count. So if you think about being eligible for the fall of 2025, then you would have been in this coming March and a couple months ago, October, to meet that requirement. In the future, you might be able to do it the other way around, March and then October, and then leave the public school earlier in the school year, especially for homeschooling families. That's less of an option for private school students, but for homeschooling families, that might be something that would work a little bit better. It does have to be immediately preceding. I don't know if that was maybe part of the question. It can't have been like 2 or 3 years ago or something like that. You have to be enrolled in the public schools when you apply. And then, of course, a requirement is that you have to leave the public schools once you've received this. We get some people who ask, probably not in this group, but we get some people who ask, well, can I use it to attend another public school? Or, that is not allowed. The idea is that you get one or the other. Just waiting to see if we get some other questions here. Or Nicole, maybe you have some.
I have some. So I guess one of the questions is, does Georgia virtual count?
I guess by that, do you mean, is it on the list?
Yeah, because you said that some of the students who are enrolled, if they're enrolled the year before, that's a whole year before. We're wondering, like, what about homeschooling students who are taking advantage of Georgia virtual? Because technically it's an online public school.
Right. I think if you are full-time enrolled in that ought to count for the attendance requirement. You would still have to, and the reason I was asking about the list, it doesn't have an attendance zone, so it wouldn't count for eligibility for that purpose. But if you live in a bottom 25% school zone, I don't take this to the bank, but I think that if you're a full-time public, or enrolled full-time in that Georgia virtual school, that ought to count, but I'd have to go back and double check that, and I will put it on a list of things that if it's not there, that would be something that we could talk to the legislature about next year to say, hey, maybe you should consider including this among the eligibility.
And there's another question. If parents were who have their children participating in the Dexter Mosley program for sports, and it says they have to opt out of public school, does this mean that their children cannot participate in the sports?
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I know there was some conversation about that, and certainly that wouldn't have been any of our intention that you wouldn't be able to participate like that. But I'd have to go back and look at exactly how it ended up being written. And certainly we could get some clarification from the Education Savings Authority. One thing that I think in the long term, I don't believe would be possible as much now, but as this program matures and people have experience with it, and frankly, the public schools have some experience with it, we would like to see where you could buy back a class or two from the public school. So you would withdraw as a full-time student, but if you wanted your child to take calculus or AP physics or band or something like that from your local public school, that you would be able to buy that a la carte. We see that in other states. The way the law was written here, I don't think that would necessarily be possible yet. But also, this is one of those concepts that most people are used to what they experienced, either growing up as a child or with their own children. And most people, send their kids to a public school or private school or something like that. So there's a little difficulty with policymakers getting them to think about something that kind of a concept, that's really not within the confines of what they're used to. So we focused first on getting the program in place, and then we'll try to improve it in ways like that down the road. But we can definitely check with the authority on the Dexter Mosley question.
Okay. And I have another question is, you pretty much answered it, because they were wondering about the a la carte. Will schools ever have an opportunity where they will sell some of their classes a la carte, like some of the hybrid schools and homeschool cooperatives do at this time?
Yeah, we'd like to see that. I don't think it now. However, a non-public virtual school. For instance, a virtual school operating, not even just in Georgia, you ought to be able to buy classes from them that way. And if there's a private school that's willing to sell you a la carte, you ought to be able to use the scholarship that way.
We have a couple of questions from educational providers, and these educational providers, they also want to know, because I noticed on the website for Georgia, My Georgia Promise, at the bottom, it says that the private school or micro school, or however the school, if you're a micro school, hybrid school, private school, it says that the application closes on December the 6th. That's tomorrow.
I think that's an initial application period. I think you will be able to apply after that, but I would certainly reach out and verify that with the authority, because and I think they're really rushing to try to get all this stood up as fast as they can. And the way they do things the first year won't necessarily be the way they do things forever. So I believe they're doing that to try to get an initial list of approved providers in place. I'm not sure that you won't be able to apply after that, but I would definitely reach out to the authority and get clarification on that.
Okay, we have a question from an educational provider here. This is Tiffany Blassingame from the Ferguson School. And so her question is, if your rising first grader who did not attend kindergarten because it was not required by the state of Georgia would like to attend, but would you need a prior public school attendance to enroll in this program?
I think the way it's written is that you have to be eligible for kindergarten. And so you would need to look into whether, since the child did not attend kindergarten, they might still be eligible for it. And even if they age-wise would normally be going into first grade, if they were still eligible to attend kindergarten, then they ought to still qualify.
Yeah, and I know, like in the state of Georgia, you're not required to send your children to kindergarten. So, was it compulsory? I may be saying it wrong. The age is really you know, we don't have to send our kids to kindergarten. So,
well, and you see a lot of families whose children are old enough to go to kindergarten, who redshirt them for a year, as I hear people call it. Wait until they're a year older, especially with boys. That's become more common, I've noticed, in recent years. So they don't make that child start in first grade at that point. They still allow them to enroll in kindergarten. So I would think that ought to still work.
You said I have been homeschooling my now 6-year-old. He is technically in kindergarten in the fall. If he's enrolled in public school, when applying, how will we know which kids will be entering kindergarten? I get what she's saying. She's asking about the age. Is there a certain age cutoff where they're saying this child's entering kindergarten?
So we haven't seen the application yet. The portal is not going to open until early next year. I would expect late January, early February probably is the time frame for the application portal to open. The good news is that means they're still creating it, and there's still time to say, hey, here's a concern you need to make sure is addressed as you're doing that. So I'm keeping a running list. I don't work for the state and I don't work for the provider that's creating it, but I'm in touch with both of them. And so I'm keeping a running list here of questions so that I can forward them both to the authority and the provider, because they'd rather figure that out now than in a couple months when the application portal's open, try to field these questions and not know how to answer them and not have anticipated them. So these are great questions. Even if I don't know the answer, it's worth asking, because I can try to get that in front of the right people.
And we'll definitely do a follow-up and send out answer to these questions in a follow-up newsletter also. See, here's another question. So in order for students to be eligible, they have to be attending a public school for 1 year. Yes.
That's
the previous year.
If they're older than kindergarten age, then yes.
So comment about applying for something today. I think that this particular parent may be wondering about, I think you mentioned something about the S10. So if you can explain to parents what the S10 is, that will be helpful.
Yeah, so that's the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship, and it's designed, I'm going to pull up some information about that just to make sure I don't misspeak here going off the fly. But it's a program for students who have either an IEP or a 504 plan in certain areas. During the previous school year, they can qualify for a scholarship. Now, those scholarships, they vary in amount. So it really depends on Georgia funds children with special needs at different levels or different supplemental levels based on what type of need and what degree of need it is. And so that amount varies depending on the type of special need you're talking about. But if you Google Georgia Special Needs Scholarship, it'll take you to a Department of Education page with the scholarship calculator, with more, the list of qualifying 504 plans, and just all the information there. That is something that I think you can apply for anytime. You do have to, there is a public school attendance requirement for that as well, but it is not, it's not as long as for the Promise Scholarship. Now, I will say the SB 10 program is not available for homeschooling expenses. That's more of the voucher, like I was talking about at the beginning. It's a coupon for private school. So there's a private school list of those that accept this scholarship and are approved by the state for it. So you can find that at that link as well. Yeah, that wouldn't be the only program that we have for homeschooling students will be the Promise Scholarship.
Understood. And I just put the link in to, if you wanted to go to the Georgia Department of Education to get a little bit more information on the ins and out of the S10 Georgia Special Needs Scholarship and everything. And so I see another question that was asking about sports. As you know, many of the homeschoolers or those who are still like very much in the sports. This is Georgia Friday Night Lights. They want to know if their kids going to be able to still participate in at least the sports.
That rings true at my house, so I understand that for sure.
But as he was talking about, you were talking about the S10. We have a homeschool conference, and at our homeschool conference that we have every year, we actually this year are going to have funding and resources for neurodivergent students and students with disabilities. And so we will have two providers that are going to speak heavily on how the parents can navigate these particular areas. And that's Dr. Maya and Cindy Lumpkin, who will both be directing it at the Flourish Homeschooling Conference. It's flourishhomeschoolevents.org. If you want to take a moment to go look it up, that is because we do understand that in the school choice arena, it is expensive if you're outside of the school sphere, even though the public school is supposed to provide you with services according to the student fine rule. But if that is, there is understaffing and things that are happening. So we wanted to make sure that we're still presenting that information and having it available to our community. But let's see, one more question. So if someone asks, is this scholarship per year or is it just per semester? And that is so the funding will be for the whole year. And I have a follow-up question to that. Okay. So we're in the midst of school choice and a parent is coming through trying to figure out everything. And you make a choice for a school and you realize in the first semester is not a good fit. Are you stuck at that place that you have your funds?
No, and for that reason, not all of the money is dispersed to the school or the account at one time. So there's a provision where if halfway through the school year you decide this just isn't working for us either, we want to go back or we want to do something different. We don't want to pay the rest of our money to this to the service provider. It pays on, I think it's a quarterly basis. That is there are so many details to this. I apologize for not having every single one of them memorized, but certainly it is a schedule of disbursement. And so you don't have to worry about, whether we've already paid for a full year and now we either have to stick it out or reimburse somebody or something like that. It's staggered for that reason.
Okay, let's see. We have another question coming through. Oh, this is Miss Fairchild of the Melanin Village. high online community and in-person community. And she wants to know, can the vouchers be used for completely virtual private school?
Yes.
That's accredited. I'm pretty sure there's an accredited portion for it. Right.
Short answer is yes. In the legislation, a non-public virtual school was included in that list of eligible uses. So that would be one that you can use. A brick and mortar public school has to be in the state of Georgia. I should mention that. So if you want to, if you like where I grew up in Dalton, which is almost Tennessee, I wouldn't have been able to use this and go to a private school in Chattanooga. But we have encouraged them when it comes to virtual private schools, not to observe that requirement because it doesn't really make any sense.
So that means that the virtual school can be placed in another state like Texas or Arizona, but you're living in Georgia and the funds are going there.
That is my understanding of how they're going to interpret it. Yes.
Okay. And so we have
use that kind of lawyerly sort of language, but this is all new, and I apologize if there's something that ends up being a little different. We're all figuring it out at the same time. Yes, there. In terms of this question about school supplies, there will be some regulations about that, but yes, those ought to be approved uses. When you talk about materials, and that gets into the I'm looking at a different part of the website here where it talks additional expenses authorized by the Georgia Education Savings Authority. I think those are the types of things that it would not hurt to reach out to the authority and say, hey, we want to make sure that this is something that's covered. But I'll put this on the list of questions to ask them for clarification as well.
And so something very interesting that I find very interesting is like I met the ESA, I would say, coordinator who's from Arizona. And so in Arizona for their ESA, they have a white list and a black list. And basically they have a list that says these are the things that are automatically approved and these are the things that are not automatically approved. Like obviously, watches are approved because you want your child to learn how to tell time. A Rolex is not. So, you just want to, there's those things that they're trying to make sure of. Do you know that if in any time, because you were talking about the parents, so group of parents who will be reviewing this, will there be within that group, has there been any talk of maybe a list like that they can, quickly approve certain things to get them in order for the parents?
So the idea is that the vendor that has been hired to operate that wallet and that marketplace, yes, you'd have that list of things that are no question, and so not just like tuition at this private school, but this curriculum or these textbooks or that might even be how they approve the crayons, right? Like you can buy these Crayola crayons, 64 pack or whatever at these approved stores or that kind of like that. That's how they would go ahead and do that. And then there may be a list of things that no way, no how, never going to approve. And then the parent review committee is going to be there to adjudicate things that are kind of in between, right? I guess in the white list, black list terminology, you say the gray list, maybe, what is this the kind of thing that ought to be included? And so that'll be a longer process. One thing that we've seen in other states, and I would ask for advocacy for your children, but also a little patience. We've seen in other states that getting this right for homeschoolers has been the most difficult thing. Because there are more unique situations, there are more unique requests, there are more service providers that people are trying to use, and having a pre-approved list of every single possible use gets a little overwhelming. So you then get into more of the, okay, are we going to approve this? Some of that comes down to the approval process. Some of it comes down to the way the vendor operates. We have, as advocates, have been pushing for making sure that the vendor is as customer service oriented as possible and understands that the customer is not the state of Georgia. The customer is the parent. The customer is the family. The customer is the student. So that's something that a little bit of understanding, but if it goes a little too far, then certainly, I would imagine anyone who's homeschooling their children is good at advocating for their children. And this will be a case where you have to put those skills to use, but also let us know in the advocacy community, what's going on, what's not working, where are the hiccups and the snags and everything else that you need someone to help speak up and try to get something changed. Hold
up. Speaking of advocacy, I do want to take a moment to make sure that we go back to the GeorgiaPublicPolicy.org has a Get the Friday Facts. So it's a newsletter that actually, this is the newsletter where I found out that my Promise Scholarship was open and everything. This is also the place where we got the information about where's the list of schools that are in attendance zones that make you eligible. So if you want to get more facts along the way and be able to have everything in front of you, the Georgia Public Policy does have a newsletter. If you go to their website and click on Get the Friday Facts, you will be able to have the data to be able to make whatever decisions you need to make. Now we have one other comment and question.
I'll put in a personal plug for that. If you sign up, it's completely free. If you sign up tonight, it'll be in your inbox at 5:30 tomorrow morning. There's no better time to sign up than right now. Go ahead and get in there and do check your spam folder. It does get sent to spam sometimes, but once you get it cleared, it should be all good to go. But yep, sign up tonight. You'll see it tomorrow.
And so we have another question, and with this question, I'm thinking the answer is no, but I'm going to let you. Because it makes sense. What she's asking makes sense. I'm gonna be honest with you. As an Abeka parent, we use the same workbook over and over again for children. Children were copying. They were like, "Don't use that workbook. You have 3 other siblings behind you that are going to use those supplies."
I certainly think if you're talking about something that's going to be hand me down to younger children, once it's bought, right? They're not going to come take it back from you. If you're talking about, well, I have one child eligible, can I buy stuff for the older child? That's where it's really going to get into how they approve it and what stipulations they put. Because I do think probably you're going to have to be able to make a credible case that it is for the child who's receiving the scholarship. Now, I'm trying to think of an expense that everybody would participate in. And Nicole, you might have a better idea than that.
I would think an expense that everybody would participate in is a laptop.
Okay. Yep. So if that's
a laptop. I don't know if they're going to approve like maybe any TV displays or anything like that, because I do know of people who have children who are visually impaired and they do need bigger screens for things like that. Like I said, I was an Abeka parent, which with the CDs and tapes. And so my kids literally would sit in the living room and watch it on a big screen TV like they were in class with their little desk and everything. So I don't know that, but I do know that the technology equity divide is big in homeschooling. So needing an actual laptop, I would even want to ask the question even further than that. Would they allow you to pay for Wi-Fi? To be in your home, because that's another portion of this, and we saw this during the pandemic where so many public school children, they may have had a device but didn't have access to the Wi-Fi. Would another supply be a printer? Many of us are copy work enthusiasts around here. My children did many Bible scriptures that were copied, and memory work, and dictation of sentences. So I was printing those things. So would they approve a printer, the toner? These are supplies that I think not just a traditional homeschooler, but anyone who's schooling at home would probably need along the way. And they are supplies that do cross over into the other children along the way.
Right. Now, great questions, great examples. I don't want to try to answer it because I don't feel confident that I can give the right answer, but I've written it down on my list of things to bring up when I talk with the agency or the vendor sometime soon. So, if I were in charge, they'd absolutely be approved. Now, same thing as the Rolex example, maybe a laptop, but not a souped up gaming laptop or something like that.
I may push back against that because I was a robotics coach. And so I love some FRC, some FLL and FTC around here in Georgia, a robotics team. I would probably be like, hey, we at least need a laptop that can do some SolidWorks around here, some LabVIEW.
And that kind of experience on the parent review committee is going to be really important, right? So that, because those of us who haven't, that would not have occurred to me. So if I'm sitting here coming up with a list, I'd say laptop, yes, big time graphics card or whatever, maybe not. But there's an example of why it could be. And certainly, look, and this is one thing that I get frustrated by when you see these stories out of other states, like, oh, look how this money was spent. Public schools use money for expense, really over the top expenses like this, or
gymnasiums. Gymnasiums.
Right.
A lot of I couldn't believe how many high schools renovated their gyms during COVID.
That's right.
All the
time. And then we want to apply this super strict magnifying glass to families that are choosing to do it a different way, but are trying to accomplish the same things, right? So absolutely. And that's one thing that I would say is if in your community of home educators here, encourage people who end up having children in the program to apply to be part of this parent review committee. Getting the full range of experiences and uses and how homeschooling families actually work is going to be so absolutely vital to making that parent review committee work effectively. So not everybody can be on the committee. It's a pretty limited number, but I would really encourage to make sure we get proper representation from the folks in your network.
I think we have one or two more questions. We're going to start to wrap it up. It says, could the funds be used for extracurriculars like martial arts, school gymnastics? And she put on here, one more, she put on here, even music equipment. And as a mother of a child who is on his way, he's a senior, he's going to college, and he wants to be a composer. I have spent my fair share of money in this house on cellos, violas, violins, keyboards, drums, electric basses. So part of me is like, yeah. And everyone I know who homeschools, it feels like everybody's child takes piano as part of their music education and homeschooling. So I'm thinking once they get this provider list together, these will be about the providers, right?
That's right. And so I'll answer this a couple ways. The website does say supplemental materials approved by the authority, which is sort of the catch-all to say maybe we didn't think about it, or maybe we need to, consider lots of possibilities. It's not currently specified as an approved, a gymnastics piece of equipment or music equipment or something like. As a band kid growing up, I absolutely think that those sorts of things should be included. I don't think it'll be a stretch for them to get included. And I can tell you, those of us who advocated for the bill absolutely had things like that on our minds as ought to be included. When you write the bill, you don't want to get too prescriptive, because when you get really prescriptive, then anything that's not in the list ends up necessarily excluded, right? So you try to write categories or of things and go from there. So I think still to be determined on that, but certainly that's within the spirit of the way this law was written, that those sorts of things would be eligible expenses.
I see a question about field trips, and I'm thinking that field trips may probably at some point end up being under a provider. It will probably end up as probably like in the realm of provider. Maybe right. Even if the family is directly reaching out to the Atlanta Zoo or something like that. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of these organizations that do that are going to make sure they're on the providers list to be a part of these funds. I guess the last question that I'm gonna go to is from this parent. They said, can you speak on being a homeschool parent, but really It is not for them at all. We have to be in the public system for the scholarship. And I want to make sure I speak on this one. So as a homeschooling parent who actually participated in the lobbying efforts for this, I felt like this opportunity for school choice, it is like we're waiting at the train station for our turn. So at this moment, the train for school choice is moving out. We're not in the first few cabooses, but I do feel like as this is becoming more and more popular and we're seeing a lot of success, there are going to be traditional homeschoolers who show up in the space and say, I want access to this, the tax dollars, and I don't want to put my child in public school. And that is fair for me to be able to access it. This is where the starting point is, where they felt comfortable. And so I feel like at this moment, giving other parents an opportunity. I'm at the end of homeschooling, 3 of my 4. So I will have 3 in college next year. And so I do feel like this is the kindness that we can extend to the community to say we are on board for parents to have this opportunity that are just showing up. Many of the veteran homeschool parents, y'all are amazing. Y'all rock this every day. You figure out how to stretch $10. You know, we crack a joke about you rob Peter to pay Paul, pray Jesus cover it all, and everything gets bought for the school year. So we know that in that way that many of us are making the sacrifices, but our time will come. And please encourage those who have an opportunity to get on this train to apply for it. The main thing is that we want a lot of applications to go in. We really want a lot of applications to go in to see where this is going to go and how this is going to be, because I do understand as a traditional homeschooler, you're like, I'm not putting mine back in public school, but it should be available to me. And so you are absolutely right, Mr. Hart. It should be available. But we are getting toward the end, but go ahead, Kyle.
No, I was just going to say it's very well said. And one issue that we've had, I think, in Georgia, and one reason we haven't moved as fast in new school choice options in our state as we've seen in Florida or Arizona are kind of 2 of the traditional leaders on this. Georgia, once upon a time, was a leader on this. We were kind of on the cutting edge of school choice options. That was 15 years ago. It's been kind of a slow go since then. A couple things I think contributed to that, certainly not the only reason. One is that we're very siloed in our choices. You got homeschoolers, you got charter school students, you got private school, and they don't work with each other all the time to boost everyone's options, understanding that if everybody speaks together, then everybody's going to get more of their particular option. And when each silo is operating independently, each one is stunted in how much progress it's going to make. And then the other thing is just being vocal about this to elected officials, right? I mean, they hear all the time from the public school community and the people that oppose these sorts of programs, how awful it's going to be, how it's going to defund schools and everything else. Frankly, they don't hear as often from those who are taking advantage of other options or would like to take advantage of other options. And that's always a struggle, I would say, for the advocates, is to get to really, I mean, you can find examples, right? You can find people who will say, hey, I represent this, but we need numbers. We need volume. We need lots and lots of voices banding together to do this. And I completely agree with what Nicole said. This is step 1 of this program. Eligibility is not just the attendance requirement, but the eligible school, right? I mean, we've seen other states do universal eligibility where you don't have to attend a bottom 25% school. That's the way we started with this bill. It got whittled down during the legislative process. But, I think we all in the advocate community want that to become a universal thing, so that if you're in the 26th percentile, your school's not doing well and you get nothing. 25th percentile, you qualify. That doesn't really make any sense to anybody, right? It's an arbitrary line, and we want to get rid of it. over time, and we want to expand it in every way possible to as many families as possible.
And so I would like to say that if you are a homeschooling parent, I said that there are two sets of homeschoolers right now. We notice the population is divided. There are traditional homeschoolers who are like, don't touch anything. And then there are homeschoolers who are like, it's expensive out here, y'all. It looks a lot different. I mean, I have a 23-year-old, 21-year-old, 17-year-old. And so I homeschool when a lot of things were a lot cheaper. And now I'm homeschooling other children, a 13-year-old, and it's a lot more expensive. But if you need any help with protections of your homeschool, there is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA. I am a Georgia Volunteer Ambassador for HSLDA. I will also recommend that if you want to learn more about what's going on here in Georgia with homeschooling, you can talk to the Georgia Home Education Association. You have Mary Beth Morris over there, and if you want to learn more about homeschooling in particular. And lastly, I would like to there is the Georgia Can. Georgia Can has an Epic Parent Fellowship, and we're at the end of the cohort for that. But this is a place for parents, homeschool, public school, private school, whatever you are, to come into a place to learn how to do advocacy the way that you feel comfortable doing advocacy, because we're all not going to agree with everything. But what are the things that you are passionate about? And so we are definitely here at our platform supporting of any type of way in which parents can figure out what works best for them. As we're wrapping up, I just want to make sure that I talk to everybody and ask you to please take a moment to fill out our survey. So we have a survey, and so our survey is saying, hey, what did you think about this? Please give us the feedback. Please give us the feedback. Kyle has been so gracious to give his evening and everything, but please give us the feedback. When you go in there, you'll see there will be a long list of community contacts. Click on Nicole Doyle, that is my name, and fill out the application and tell them, how did you feel about it? How was it helpful? What are some things that we could do better? As I ask my kids when I say, did you do your best on your assignment? I said, was it your guys' best or was it your best that you thought? So we wanted to be able to have an opportunity to do that. Also, we are getting ready for the Flourish Family Homeschool Conference that is here. And so with our homeschool conference, we really do go through several things. We have in the past gone over the NCAA transcripts, how to homeschool through high school, how to homeschool to the Ivy League, because we do have many kids here in our community that have gone to the Ivy League. We're also, like I said, we're going to have a portion talking about neurodivergent, funding of neurodivergent students and students with disabilities in this place. And we're also going to have something for the educational entrepreneur parent, where we're going to talk about different revenue streams, because what I have found in the homeschooling community, it feels like about 60 to 70% of you all are entrepreneurs, which is amazing. And so please, like I said before, take an opportunity to fill out the survey. I'm going to leave it on the screen for a few moments, and we will end with Kyle and is there anything else? How can they reach you?
Yep. So our website is georgiapolicy.org. You can email me, Kyle W at georgiapolicy.org. Like we said before, go sign up for the Friday Facts. Those are all great ways to get in touch with me or the rest of my team. And I will just echo what Nicole said, feedback and just getting this list of questions. We're early on in these efforts to try to get the word out. And so it's really beneficial for me to know what is on people's minds, right? And so I'll be better prepared for the next one. I can get some answers from the agency about things that I don't know how they're going to rule on things. So I can give them a heads up that they're going to have people asking about it. And that's a win-win for all of us. So I just really appreciate all the questions, all the comments, and just the opportunity to be with y'all tonight. I just really admire and appreciate the work that y'all do, and admire what you're doing for your kids. So thank you for that.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening. If there's anything else, you can also reach out to us at info@georgiablackhomeeducators.com if you want to reach out to us with any additional questions. It is also, We also have our website in which, hold on, let me find my website. So if you want to reach out to ask any questions or get in contact with us with the website, like I said, we have the conference coming up in January, which is during National School Choice Week, actually. And if we have educational providers who would like to be in the space as a vendor or an exhibitor or sponsor, we are always welcoming sponsors. Please check us out. And so I bid you a good evening, and we will, I guess I can end with a short promo video that talks about the conference, and that'll be it. Thank you, Kyle. We appreciate you being here.